run Monte Carlo on a schedule that isn't ready, and you don't get insight. You get sophisticated, confident nonsense dressed up in a beautiful histogram. So before we simulate anything today, we earn the right to. Then we build the model properly. The ranges, the register, the distributions, the correlations, the thousands of iterations that turn one guess date into an honest range of outcomes. And then we read what comes out the other side. P-values that tell you the real odds. Drivers that tell you where to spend your mitigation budget. And a recovery plan built in Acumen 360 that's honest about what it actually costs to get back on track. This is the final video of Season 2, and it's the biggest one because it closes the entire assurance pipeline we opened with all the way back in Episode 1. Fuse told us if the schedule was credible. Today, Risk tells us how likely it is to succeed, and 360 tells us how it could be saved if it isn't. Let's finish this properly. Welcome back to Catalyst Grid. I'm Kingsley Imufua, and this is Schedule Assurance with Deltek Acumen. Quick anchor before we begin, because it matters more today than ever. Episode 1 gave us the pipeline, import through publish. Episode 2 got the workbook and the import right. Parts 2, 3, and 4 took us through the entire Fuse diagnostic pass, vital signs, logic, leads and lags, constraints, float, calendars, progress, critical paths, the schedule index, forensic comparison, and benchmarking. That was the whole quality half of the pipeline. Today, we complete the rest of it. Risk adjust, mitigate, accelerate, approve, publish. 3 parts, 1 video, and this one closes the season. Part 1, risk readiness, and the distinction between uncertainty and risk that everything else depends on. Part 2, building the actual risk model, registers, mapping, distributions, correlation, and how Monte Carlo really works. And Part 3, reading what comes out. P-values, drivers, mitigation, and Acumen 360's recovery scenarios. Then we'll close the whole season together. Let's start by earning the right to simulate anything at all. A deterministic schedule gives you exactly one calculated completion date built from exactly one duration for every single activity. And reality never actually behaves that tidily. Design work may take longer than planned. Procurement may run late. Approvals may be delayed by an authority you don't control. Installation productivity varies with crew, weather, and conditions. Testing sometimes fails and has to repeat. Specific risk events either happen or they don't. And depending on which of those things go wrong, different logic paths can become the one actually driving your finish date. Remember the near critical paths from Part 3, quietly waiting to take over. Acumen Risk exists to quantify all of that exposure properly, using Monte Carlo Simulation, duration uncertainty ranges, and discrete risk events, instead of pretending one number captures the whole truth. Here's the discipline that most teams skip, and it's the single biggest reason risk analysis produces garbage. Do not run a formal quantitative schedule risk analysis until the underlying program is genuinely credible. That means checking a real readiness gate first. Complete scope. A credible WBS, a valid data date, realistic, honestly recorded progress, complete logic, everything we hunted for back in Part 2 of this diagnostic journey, controlled constraints, each with its birth certificate, appropriate calendars, credible, defensible durations, agreed completion milestones, no unexplained negative float sitting quietly in the network, a risk register that's actually been developed, not invented on the spot. Subject matter experts genuinely available to give real input, critical interfaces properly represented in the model, and no material hidden work still buried inside unnamed lags. That's a long list on purpose. A poor deterministic program produces a sophisticated but completely unreliable probabilistic result, and the danger is that the output still looks impressive. A polished histogram built on a broken schedule is worse than no analysis at all because it borrows the appearance of rigor it hasn't actually earned. Now, the distinction that shapes everything we build for the rest of this video, and I want you to hold it precisely because the two are modeled completely differently. Uncertainty is normal variability and something that's expected to happen regardless. Cable installation will occur. It's definitely happening, but it could reasonably take anywhere from 20 to 35 days. You model that with a minimum, a most likely, and a maximum duration. A risk event is different in kind. It's something that may or may not occur at all. There's a 30% probability that unsuitable ground conditions will require remediation, and if that happens, it causes somewhere between 10 and 30 days of delay. You model that with a probability of occurrence, a minimum, most likely, and maximum impact, and the specific activities or milestones the event would actually affect. Here's the trap to avoid. Never model the same underlying issue as both general uncertainty and a discrete risk event, unless you're deliberately controlling for that overlap. Double count a risk and your exposure looks worse than reality. Fail to model it at all, in either form, and your exposure looks better than reality. Both are equally dishonest. Readiness earns you the right to build the model. It doesn't build it for you. That's the actual craft, and it's where risk analysis is genuinely won or lost, in the quality of the inputs nobody sees, long before anyone looks at a single output. Here's the discipline sequence, not a button you press. Validate the deterministic schedule and fuse first. Everything from parts 2 through 4 of this journey. Define the scope of the risk analysis. Identify the target milestones you actually care about. Establish uncertainty ranges. Develop the risk register. Map risks to the activities or milestones they actually affect. Select distributions. Set correlations where they're genuinely justified. Run a test simulation. Validate that test result before trusting it. Run the final simulation. Review the histogram and the confidence levels it produces. Identify the risk drivers. Identify the common critical paths. Develop mitigations. Run a mitigated scenario. Compare pre- and post-mitigation exposure. Select a management confidence level. Build the risk-adjusted scenario and publish and track it. 20 steps in that order, and every one of them assumes the ones before it were done properly. Exactly the same dependency chain that governs the whole pipeline. Start with the ranges themselves, because this is where credibility is either earned or lost before the simulation even runs. Run a genuine workshop and ask real questions for every uncertain activity. What's the shortest credible duration? The most likely? The longest credible duration? Specifically excluding any separate risk events you're modeling elsewhere? What evidence actually supports each of those numbers? Does the estimate already include normal rework, or would rework push it further? Does it account for weather, approval time, resource constraints? And is this range genuinely independent of the activities sitting next to it, or are they secretly moving together? Avoid the shortcut that ruins entire risk models. A blanket range like 80%, 100%, 120%, applied identically to everything unless that specific range is actually supported and suitable for that class of work. A transformer manufacturing duration with a genuine range built from supplier data and market conditions is defensible. The same percentage stretch slapped onto every single activity in the schedule is theater. Now the discrete risk events, captured properly in a register. Good fields include the risk ID and title, the cause, the actual risk event itself, the consequence, a category, an owner, the probability, minimum, most likely, and maximum schedule impact, the same 3 for cost impact, the affected activity or milestone, the response strategy, mitigation actions and their owner and due date, the pre-mitigation rating, and the post-mitigation probability and impact once a response is applied. And write every risk the same disciplined way. Because of a stated cause, there is a possibility that a stated event occurs, resulting in a stated consequence. For example, because the transformer design hasn't been frozen, there's a possibility the manufacturing slot will be missed, resulting in a 30 to 90-day delay to permanent power availability. That structure forces clarity that a vague one-line risk description never will. Then, map each risk to the activities or milestones it actually affects. A single activity, several, a whole WBS group, a milestone, even multiple projects. And watch for one specific danger in how mapping works. Acumen includes an absolute mapping option, which can apply the full stated impact to every single activity the risk is mapped to, rather than distributing it sensibly. Review that setting carefully every time, because used carelessly, it can multiply a risk's modeled impact far beyond what it should realistically be. Every uncertain duration or impact needs a shape, not just 3 numbers. Triangular uses minimum, most likely, and maximum directly, and it's appropriate where the data is limited. But the team can credibly estimate those 3 points. Beta PERT uses the same 3 inputs but weights the outcome more heavily toward the most likely value. The familiar formula is minimum plus 4 times most likely plus maximum, all divided by 6. Uniform treats every value across the range as equally likely, and you should use it cautiously because it assumes no central tendency at all, which is rarely how real durations actually behave. And discrete or custom distributions suit situations with a small number of genuinely distinct outcomes, supplier A delivering in 60 days, supplier B in 75, or emergency air freight in 45. Whatever you choose, document the selection and the reasoning in your risk methodology, because a distribution choice made silently is a distribution choice nobody can defend later. Activities are often correlated, moving together because of a shared underlying driver. Similar productivity trends across repeated floors of a building. Common labor availability across a region. Shared weather exposure. The same supplier feeding multiple activities. The same approval authority. The same design team working across several packages. Model correlation only where the relationship is genuinely technically defensible. Without it, a simulation can unrealistically assume every activity independently rolls good and bad luck on its own, which understates real exposure. Over-correlate everything and you exaggerate it instead. Now the engine itself. Monte Carlo Simulation, sometimes paired with a more efficient sampling approach called Latin hypercube, repeatedly recalculates the entire program using randomly selected values drawn from your defined ranges. At every single iteration, the software selects a duration for each uncertain activity, determines which risk events actually fire that iteration based on their probability, selects an impact for the events that do occur, applies all of it to the mapped activities, recalculates the full CPM network from scratch, and records the resulting milestone dates, costs, and which path was critical that time. Do that thousands of times, and what comes out isn't one number. It's a distribution of everything that could plausibly happen, given everything you told the model was possible. 1,000 simulated outcomes are just noise until you know how to read them. That's the whole point of the next part, and it's where all this careful input work finally pays off. Because now we can answer the question the entire season has been building toward. Not just, is this schedule sound? But how likely is it to actually succeed, and if it isn't, what do we do about it? A p-value is a percentile in that simulated distribution of outcomes. P50 is the median result, the date by which about half of all simulated outcomes finished, with the other half finishing later. It is not a guaranteed date. It is not automatically the most likely single outcome. And critically, it is usually not the same as your original deterministic date. P75 is the date by which 75% of simulated outcomes finished. P80, 80%. P90, 90%, leaving roughly a 10% chance of finishing even later than that. Here's a real pattern worth internalizing. Deterministic finish, say the 22nd of December. P50 finish, the 26th of January. P80 finish, the 3rd of February. That gap between the deterministic date and P50 is not a rounding error. It's the simulation revealing just how much confidence the single-point schedule never actually had. And here's the number that should genuinely concern a project team. If the histogram shows that only, say, 4% of simulated outcomes actually achieve the current contractual date, that means the model estimates roughly a 96% probability of finishing later than promised. That doesn't mean the project is fated to fail. It means, under the current logic, durations, and risk assumptions, the target as currently committed is a long shot, and everyone making decisions around that date deserves to know it. Schedule contingency is simply the gap between a reference date and your chosen confidence level date. Deterministic finish to P80 is one common convention. P50 to P80 is another. Whichever you use, state it explicitly, because an undefined convention makes every contingency number impossible to compare or defend later. And here's a genuinely important management point. There is no universal rule that every project must commit at P80. An internal planning target might reasonably sit at P50, a working control date somewhere around P60 to P70, a client-facing commitment, typically 75 to 80 Philippine pesos, a board or financing commitment, often 80 to 90 Philippine pesos, and highly regulated completions may follow an organization-specific standard entirely. The right confidence level depends on risk appetite, contractual exposure, the real consequence of being late, whether contingency can be held centrally or not, the maturity of the design, the stage procurement has actually reached, the quality of the risk model itself, and how much room remains for further mitigation. That choice is a management decision. It is never a default the software hands you. Now, where should mitigation effort actually go? Acumen identifies the activities and risk events contributing most to uncertainty around a chosen milestone. Risk driver views, tornado charts ranking contribution by size, and a mitigation burn down showing exposure falling as actions land. Here's the subtlety worth understanding properly. A driver isn't automatically the longest activity or the highest scoring item on a qualitative risk list. It ranks highly because it frequently becomes critical across many iterations, because its own variation strongly correlates with movement in the milestone, because its risk impact is genuinely large, because it sits at a merge point pulling in risk from several paths, or because it combines both high probability and high impact at once. Two specific measures help separate real drivers from noise. Criticality index, roughly the percentage of simulated iterations in which a given activity actually sat on the critical path. And sensitivity, how strongly that activity's own variation is associated with variation in the final outcome. An activity can be highly critical, but barely sensitive, meaning it's often on the critical path but doesn't actually swing the date much when it moves. Or it can be rarely critical, but hugely sensitive when it does become critical. The strongest mitigation candidates combine meaningful criticality, meaningful sensitivity, real risk contribution, and one just as important, a genuinely practical mitigation option that actually exists. And remember Part 3's lesson about paths. A deterministic schedule shows one critical path. The risk model routinely reveals several common critical paths, each one critical in a different share of simulated outcomes, and reporting those top paths with their frequencies is often more useful to management than the single deterministic path ever was. Build at least two scenarios. Scenario A, current exposure, unmitigated. Scenario B, mitigated exposure. For every mitigation action, define exactly what it affects, the action itself, an owner, its cost, when it would actually be implemented, how much it reduces probability, how much it reduces impact, its effect on the program, and the residual risk that remains even after it's applied. Then compare the two scenarios properly. How much does P50 move, P75, P80? How does the probability of meeting the target actually change? How much does contingency shrink? Do the top risk drivers change? Do the common critical paths shift? What is the mitigation cost against the value of the days it genuinely recovers? A useful management measure here, and it's a practical tool rather than a formula built into the software, is mitigation efficiency. The expected schedule exposure you reduce, divided by what the mitigation costs. That single ratio helps rank a list of competing mitigation options fairly, instead of funding whichever one sounds most urgent in the room. And now, if the numbers say the project genuinely needs to recover time, Acumen 360, 3 approaches. Automatic goal-based acceleration, where you set a target date and the system searches for a combination of adjustments that moves toward it. Targeted acceleration, applying defined criteria, reduce construction activities by up to a stated percentage, exclude statutory approvals entirely, only touch activities with float below a certain threshold. And interactive acceleration, where you test specific what-if questions, live in a workshop, and see the impact immediately. Here's the discipline that separates a credible recovery plan from wishful thinking. Every date reduction the software identifies as mathematically possible still needs a real physical method behind it. Crashing, genuinely adding resources, a second shift, weekend working, more equipment, expedited manufacturing. Fast tracking, genuinely overlapping work that was previously sequential, progressive design releases, early procurement packages, phased access, area-by-area testing, resequencing the order of execution without necessarily adding resources at all, scope segmentation, splitting large activities into areas, floors, systems, or partial handovers, or an alternative methodology entirely, modular construction, off-site fabrication, a different supplier. For every proposed change, validate it properly. The original and proposed duration, the physical method, any additional resource and cost, technical owner approval, the safety and quality impact, and the residual float once it's applied. And here's the step almost everyone skips, and it's the most important one in this entire section. Rerun every major acceleration scenario back through Acumen Risk. A deterministic recovery plan might show 30 days recovered. Once you re-risk it, the reliable P80 improvement might only be 10. The acceleration is real. The certainty of it is usually smaller than the headline number suggests. And a recovery plan that hasn't been risk-tested is just another optimistic deterministic schedule, wearing a different hat. Let's bring this final video together, and then let's bring the whole season together with it. Part 1. Earn the right to simulate. The readiness gate exists because a broken schedule produces confident nonsense, not insight. And keep uncertainty, which will happen, cleanly separate from risk events, which may or may not. Part 2. Build the model on honest inputs, real workshopped ranges, a disciplined register written as cause, event, consequence, careful mapping, a defensible distribution choice, and correlation only where it's genuinely justified, because Monte Carlo is only as trustworthy as what you feed it. Part 3. Read the outputs like a professional. P-values are percentiles, not guarantees, and the confidence level you commit to is a management decision, not a default. Chase real drivers using criticality and sensitivity together, not just the longest bar on a chart. Compare mitigation scenarios properly, and when you recover a schedule with 360, always re-risk it before you believe the recovered date. Now the whole season, in one line. Fuse tells you whether the program is structurally credible. Risk tells you how likely it is to achieve its dates. 360 helps you identify how it could be improved, recovered, or accelerated, and none of the three ever replaces technical, planning, commercial, and management judgment. That sentence is the entire 14-episode journey, compressed. If you followed this whole season, from the assurance pipeline in episode 1, through every diagnostic check, the index, forensic comparison, benchmarking, and now the complete risk and recovery build, thank you, genuinely. This is dense, unglamorous, career-defining material, and you stayed for all of it. The full playlist is linked below and on screen, organized by pipeline stage. So you or anyone on your team can jump straight to whatever's needed. Tell me in the comments which single episode changed how you actually work day to day. I read every one, and it shapes what comes next. And vote in the poll on screen for Season 3. Earned value management, done properly this time. Primavera P6 mastery, for the tool most of you actually run. Or delay claims and forensic analysis, taking the comparison work from today all the way into the commercial and legal domain. You've built an assurance practice with me across 2 full seasons now. Let's pick the next thing to master together. Subscribe so you're here when it drops. I'm Kingsley Emufua, your host. Signing off, do not forget to subscribe, like, comment, and share. Stick around for more impacted knowledge. Thank you for assuring better schedules with me. This is Catalyst Grid. Assure the schedule.